Hi everyone, this is Robert and welcome to IDG Live. Today we're looking at The Hound. This is the latest in a longish series looking at mysteries in the world of Ice and Fire. So it's not just a character study here, there are some mysteries tied up with this one character in particular. There's the Gravedigger mystery and there's also the Unkiss and another couple of things perhaps we'll touch on a little bit later. But as always, we are going to frame this around questions from my patrons. I'm going to pick up as much as I can from the chat. But I will start, I think, with a sort of an overview of the character and the man, who he is and what drives him. Because Sandor Clegane comes from House Clegane, which is a relatively recent house. It's the first ever Lord Clegane was Sandor and Gregor, his older brother's grandfather. Now, he started out life, or spent most of his life, as a kennel master to the Lannisters. And then one day, Titus Lannister, this is Tywin's father, started being attacked by a lioness. We don't have huge amounts of context for this, but that was what was happening. And the day was saved by this kennel master who came in and protected Lord Lannister from the lioness at the cost of one leg and 3 dogs. And so, as a reward, he got promoted up into the landed gentry, and there's a house. It's only there's a tower and some lands, not huge amounts, but they became bannermen of House Lannister. So that's the start of the house just within the last few decades. We don't know huge amounts about his son, but he had 3 children that we know of. We have Gregor, who we know as the Mountain. We have Sandor, the Hound, and they had a sister as well. The way that we're introduced to this character of Sandor is through a story from his childhood. Someone had tried to curry favor with their father and had given toys to the children. And Sandor saw the toy that his brother had got, and his brother wasn't around. He played with it. But then Gregor came back and grew angry, very angry. And he was a huge child even then. And he grabbed Sandor and he thrust his face down into this fiery brazier and burned it. And he had to be pulled off by 3 full-grown men. Now, that is where his facial scarring comes from. But if you're thinking about the image we have on the show, that one behind me, it is a lot more gruesome than this. It is very, I mean, forgive the imagery, but he has no ear. There's just a hole there. There's no skin at all on one side of his face. A bit of bone is sticking out. There are no lips. Half of his lips have gone. He has this gravelly, nasty to listen to voice. He combs the hair he has all the way over to cover up the half of his face that is disfigured. He is a horrible kind of figure of a man to look at and hear. And so that is the start of this understanding of who he is, which is in relation to his brother. We'll come back to this relationship many times, this relationship between him and Gregor. Their father died in a hunting accident. Hints are that it might have been a bit suspicious. Their sister also died in suspicious circumstances, which meant that Gregor inherited the title of Lord Clegane. We're told that very day Sandor left the family home, never to return. And he went to Casterly Rock and he offered himself in service to the ruling family of the Westerlands. And they took him up on it. Why did he go there? The implication is that if anywhere was going to be protected from his brother, it would be working for the Lannisters. So he grew in the Lannister service, started being seen for his loyalty and strength and fighting ability. Cersei appointed him the official protector, sworn shield of Joffrey, her eldest son. And he became known as the Hound, not just because there are the sigil of the house's three dogs. As the background and history of being kennel masters, those three dogs who'd died saving Lord Lannister all those years ago, but also because he was seen as fiercely loyal. He would do what he was told. And so for a number of years, that's what his job was. We're told that he could have been knighted, but he refused it. He did not want to be a knight. And he stood next to Joffrey, protecting him as he grew up. He also became known for having this dog's head helmet that added an even more fearsome kind of visage to him as he was going into combat in some way. That, again, we'll come back to. We meet him in the main story as he is part of the entourage that goes with King Robert and Joffrey and all the rest of them all the way up to Winterfell to try to get Ned to become Hand of the King. The Hound is there as the protector to Joffrey. And we get a few brief references to him in those early chapters. He's there. He offers to kill a direwolf if Joffrey wants him to. He's sort of glowering in the background. Lots of people are quite scared of him. But we first really see him in action when they're heading back down south. If you remember, they get to the Riverlands, and there's that incident where Joffrey and Sansa go wandering off down by the riverside, and they come across Arya and Micah, the butcher's boy. And they were play fighting. Joffrey gets hurt, bitten by Nymeria, and Micah, the butcher's boy, runs off, knowing he is going to get into big trouble for this. Now, we tend to focus in on what happens with the direwolves, what this shows us about the power dynamics within the royal court at the time. But the Hound is sent off to get Micah, and he kills him. He just runs him down, kills him, and then brings back his body. This was Arya's friend, and so she hates him for it right from the very start. And this gives us an idea. He is this ruthless, very loyal person who will just do what he's told. But then we get to King's Landing. And at King's Landing, we start to see a few extra nuances to his character. We get the Tourney of the Hand. He fights in the Tourney of the Hand, and in day one, with the jousting, he does quite well. He gets through to effectively the semi-finals, and he ends the day. He starts drinking. He's not on duty. He's at the tourney. Everyone knows this. He starts drinking, but he has to end up escorting Sansa back up to the castle from the tourney grounds. And while he's there, he starts talking to her and starts seeing in her sort of an innocence, but also somebody quite trapped. Little bird, he calls her. Not just a bird that can fly free, but a little bird in a cage. And because he's drunk, he gets into telling her his background. He tells her about his brother holding his head down into those flames. And he kind of opens himself up in a way that he didn't do before, or usually. And as if realizing, well, how did I get here? Then he's like, I'll kill you if you tell anyone that. So that's our first kind of insight. The second insight happens the very next day. We get the mountain facing Loras, Sir Loras Tyrell, who's a very good jouster, it has to be said. But the Mountain has got some dirty tricks on hand to make Loris's horse a little bit too excited, let's put it that way. And basically, Sandor can see what's happening, and he just leaps in to the defense of Loris and starts fighting his brother, who is the Mountain. We all know, massively tall. If the Hound is big, tall, one of the tallest, largest, most impressive sort of physical specimens in the entire uh, world of Ice and Fire, really. But the Mountain is next level, and they just suddenly get into this fight. King Robert intervenes and says, "Stop." At which point, the Hound immediately goes down to onto one knee, stops fighting. Loris, however, grateful for what had happened with the Hound basically saving his life, he cedes his last joust to the Hound, and the Hound wins. The Hound has won the tourney of the hand, not just through being an excellent fighter, an excellent jouster, but because he stepped in to save somebody who was I mean, Loris is not a weak figure by any stretch of the imagination, but he had been tricked and he was at a disadvantage, and the Hound stood up. We're left to wonder the extent to which this was a sense of justice, or the extent to which this was him seeing a chance finally to be confronting his brother. We're getting this feeling that the harm that was done in that original childhood encounter and whatever else happened in his childhood that we don't know, that is what's really driving him. Still, as much as we're starting to see this extra layer of the Hound, when we get to the sort of the finale in King's Landing, when everyone turns on the Starks, the Hound is there. He's there. He kills some named characters. Fiercely loyal to the Lannisters, no escaping from him at all. But after that, Sir Barristan gets kicked out of the Kingsguard. I did a whole video on what was going on there. If you're interested, it's not quite as straightforward as just Cersei throwing her weight around. There's an extra layer going on there with Varys. But Sir Barristan gets kicked out, and Sandor gets promoted into the Kingsguard. And he should have been made a knight, but he refuses to be made a knight still. The implication is that he's seen his brother, Sir Gregor, and thinks, if that's what a knight's like, I'm not going to be a knight. But this doesn't stop Cersei. He's not a knight, but he can still be a member of the Kingsguard. So he gets promoted into it. He becomes this White Cloak. And although he retains this protector of Joffrey kind of role, he often is attached to looking after Sansa. And kind of stands up for her a couple of times, just in ways that sort of defy Joffrey, but never to such a great extent that it causes a huge issue. It's actually quite a clever kind of like he knows the political line here. So when she is being beaten, basically in the throne room, and he kind of objects to this. Her clothes are ripped down, leaving her half naked. He is the person who throws her his cloak to cover up. So we're starting to see these kinds of signs when she gets beaten by, I think it's Boris Blount. He is the one who dabs her mouth clean from the blood. We start to see there's another side here. There's a softer side. There's a side that actually cares about protecting Sansa. And this kind of comes to the foremost when we have the riot at King's Landing. If you remember, Marcella goes off in a boat down to Dawn, and most of the court goes down to the docks to see her off, and then heads back up, and then there's a massive riot. And in that riot, Sansa gets dragged off, and the Hound is the one who goes after her. He protects her, killing people who would be doing who knows what to her. He is very much her protector in that time. When we get to the Battle of the Blackwater, he performs really well. As you would expect, he's a fine and mighty warrior. He is part of several sallies against Stannis' troops, but it all starts going wrong when wildfire happens, because it turns out, has this huge fear of fire right from his childhood. This fear of fire has never gone away. So he just freaks out, basically. There's fire everywhere. And he runs out and he quits, basically, on the spot. But he doesn't immediately run out and leave the city. He goes into the Red Keep and he goes up into Sansa's room and waits for her. And we never have, and this is a really important point in trying to understand Sandor, we never have a POV from his perspective. So we never 100% know his motivations, what he's trying to do, why. So this is a little bit mixed. He gets drunk. He's been fighting all day. He's tired. He's emotional. He's going to quit, but he goes to seemingly try to protect Sansa, because when she comes in, he offers to take her with him to get her out of there. He's seen how she's treated in King's Landing. He's offering to take her out from there, and she says no. Eventually, there's a bit of to and fro. Eventually, it gets a little bit weird, but he puts a knife to her throat and she sings him a song. He demands a song. And with that, he takes away the knife. He takes off his now bloodied white Kingsguard cloak, leaves it there, abandons that, and heads out. She later remembers that he kissed her. But we see it, and George R. Martin has confirmed. I've got questions on this later, so the little mark by this one, we will come back to it. She remembers it later that he kissed her, but George R. Martin is clear. No, it's right. You saw it when it happened. He didn't. So that's one of these mysteries that we will definitely come back to. So what we have now is we have Arya, who is through this time, she is basically the Hound sort of goes missing now for half a book or so. Arya is up in the Riverlands and she's starting to come up with her kill list, with her prayer, and he is on it. Sandor Clegane is on the list. Meanwhile, Sansa has almost kind of idealized what happened with him, because he was the only person there who actually in King's Landing who seemed to show her any kind of care, even small amounts of care. Just like the wiping away the blood from her mouth, giving her the cloak so that she's not half naked before court, that kind of thing. And she takes his cloak and she hides it. She puts it in her chest. She keeps his cloak. So the two Stark children here, and this is one of the themes which runs through his sort of character arc, if we want to call it that, is their two reactions to him. So Sansa was initially incredibly scared of him, but then grew to almost she never like pretended that he wasn't scary, or she didn't find him ugly or anything like that, but she's almost idealizing what he was to her. But I said that he disappears for a while. He reappears when he's captured by the Brotherhood Without Banners. This is the first proper iteration of the Brotherhood Without Banners, with Beric as leader. And they want to put him on trial for what he's done. Everyone knows the Hound has done terrible things. But looking around, nobody's actually can provide any evidence for any of these things. Um, the people there haven't seen him do. They've heard these stories about him, but how are they going to dispense justice when they have no pure evidence on him? And eventually Arya says, I do. I know that he killed Micah. Now, Beric at this point says, okay, we now have a charge. And he then says, we haven't got the apparatus here, the evidence to be doing a proper trial on this. So we'll have a trial by combat. Him against the Hound. Pardon me. So they have a fight, the two of them. And eventually Sandor wins, although it's notable that the fire motif carries on through the Hound's life here. Beric, remember, he fights with a fiery sword. And so Sandor, the Hound, has to overcome his fear in order to be defending his own honor. And he is effectively found not guilty for something that we know he was guilty of. Whatever else, whatever stories and lies and half-truths there might have been about him, we know that he did this. He's admitted it himself. So we're sort of asked to call into question the validity of that. However, Beric kind of dismisses it by saying, well, perhaps the Lord of Light's got a role for him yet. And we're left to wonder whether that's why. But anyway, they let him go. They do, however, take the money he's got. So he's got a huge purse of gold, which were his winnings from that tourney. They take that from him and just sort of like say, go, get out of here. So he heads off, but then he, perhaps misguidedly, but perhaps also understandably, he sneaks back in trying to get his gold back. At which point he stumbles across Arya. And he realizes actually getting the gold's going to be quite hard. But if I take her, she's got some very powerful and very rich relatives, and I can just ransom her off. So he kidnaps Arya. So Arya now is the one who is under. We had Sansa, and now we get Arya. Arya is now the one who is sort of like in his control, and he is not the softest of masters, if master is the right word there, but he also increasingly shows a care that you perhaps wouldn't expect. But anyway, the plan is he's heard Robb Stark's heading to the twins for a wedding, so we're going up there. That's where Robb Stark is. That's Arya's brother. He will pay a good price for Arya. They reach the twins, at which point he realizes something's going very wrong. And we know what it is. This is the Red Wedding. They've arrived at the Red Wedding. What is happening outside of that main room? We often think of the Red Wedding as just what happened in that one room. The Red Wedding, once the signal had been done, all outside as well, the encamped soldiers, they'd been given loads of alcohol. They'd been told to chill out for the night, don't worry about it. But the Boltons and the Freys stayed nice and sober and then just came in, massacred the army. So the Red Wedding wasn't just what happened to those people in that hall. This was like an entire army got wiped out. The Hound has to make some quick decisions, and he realizes we can't. I don't know exactly what's happening to Robb Stark, but we can't get a ransom from him now. This is not good. Arya wants to escape and go and save her family or something. You know what Arya's like. He has to knock her out basically, in order to prevent her from doing that, and rides away and basically saves her life. And during this time in the Riverlands, it's probably worth saying, during this time in the Riverlands, he does save her life 2 or 3 different times. And they form this kind of weird bond, the two of them, is that there are many times when you think, well, Arya probably could escape right now, but she doesn't. And you have to ask, why is it that she doesn't? And part of it is that she does realize that she's not going to, the Hound isn't going to kill her or hurt her hugely. He wants her to be ransomed. So he needs to keep her alive, and he is going to take her to her relatives. So she does kind of have this motivation to just stick with him because he's basically a very good bodyguard taking her to her family. So they kind of stick together all this time, heading south from the twins, trying to work out where to go. The next plan is maybe go to the Vale to her aunt Lysa. They kind of stop at some villages for a while, sort of lose a bit of momentum. It has to be said. You get the impression that the Hound at this point, he's not as driven as he was to. I have to go off and sell Arya off to her family. He actually is almost enjoying the just being in her company, and they go to a village for actually a few weeks or something, spending time repairing their palisade wall and things like that. Almost becoming a little bit sort of domesticated in a way. But this can't last. And eventually they reach the inn at the crossroads and they get into a fight. Now, he very much stands by and lets her kill somebody that he knows is on her list. But he gets attacked by Rourg. He gets lots of wounds, and the wounds become infected to the point where he can't go on anymore. And he's sat down by this tree and asks Arya for the gift of mercy. He's going to die. And she decides not to. We'll come back to that decision. It's quite a complex decision, quite nuanced decision. She decides she's not going to give him the gift of mercy, and she goes off and leaves him to die. And then, as far as we, the reader, are concerned, that's the end of the Hound. He is dead. However, we then get, through other POVs over the course of the next book or so, ongoing rumours of the Hound doing things in the Riverlands, particularly attacking places like the Salt Pans, committing some atrocities. And we're left to wonder, is this actually the Hound? Because we thought he was dead. And Brienne hears some of these rumours as well. And one of the rumours she hears is that the Hound had Sansa, who she's looking for. And so she goes hunting for the Hound. And she comes across Septon Merrybold, who takes her to the Quiet Isle. The Quiet Isle is this island. It's sort of in a river estuary, just sort of in the Trident, just sort of a bit south from where the Battle of the Trident was. And it's set in such a way that you have to memorize the route across the mudflats in order to get there. So it's quite secluded. And on this island is this commune of Faith of the Seven people, basically, headed up by the elder brother. And Brienne arrives there. They go to the stables, and she sees this huge black horse that is very clearly the Hound's horse, which is called Stranger. And we're told that Stranger will only respond to the Hound. And so our thought is, well, how is that horse here? On working their way up towards seeing the elder brother, we get this description of this gravedigger. I've got questions about that. We will come back to that. But the hints, slight spoiler, the hints are that might be the Hound. This is a very tall person, hugely muscly and built, scarf over his face so you couldn't recognize him. And he's digging graves. So going on to the elder brother says that he came across the Hound dying. And the Hound did indeed die. And then he says Sandor Clegane is now at rest, and he says he left the helmet there on the Hound's grave. And it becomes very clear that what has happened is that Rourke took the helmet, did those terrible things. Brienne later kills Rourke, and then Lemoncloak, who's a member of the New Brotherhood without banners under Lady Stoneheart, he then takes the helmet. But what has happened to the Hound? What has happened to Sandor Clegane? Well, all the clues are that he is there on the Quiet Isle digging graves. So that's where we've left him. Is that the end of his story? If so, it would be quite a nice place for him to sort of end it. But the hints are that no, it's not. We're told many times that people are aware, or the rumours are out there. The Quiet Isle has got riches. The Quiet Isle as a place. I told you it was downstream from where the Battle of the Trident took place 15, 20 years ago by that point. But over time, things would get washed up onto the Quiet Isle. And 6 rubies, if you remember, Rhaegar had armor studded with rubies. And when Robert Baratheon hit him with his warhammer, then the rubies went flying, we're told. 6 of those rubies have now washed up on the Quiet Isle, and people have heard of this. So this is a target. The Riverlands almost everywhere has got sacked, raided at some point by somebody, except the Quiet Isle. The hints are that it will be next, and we're left to wonder, what will Sandor do? Has he now quit that life? Will he be brought back? Obviously, on the TV show, then he did come back. Some people, the implication was that it was Lemoncloak actually there, attacked what was presumably called the Quiet Isle. I don't think they called it that. And he reverted back to type. But he'd grown a bit wiser and a slightly more peaceable. So, I think it's fair to say that there is more to his character arc to come. He certainly hasn't, as far as we know, come to terms with what happened in his childhood with his brother. And there seems to be a Arya and Sansa reunion or something that is needed to kind of round off whatever was going on there. So I think that we will see him again. How is an entirely different question. Okay, let's go to the chat. Let's give a quick check. Michael Trainer, thank you very much, saying it is interesting that the 2 Stark kids who lost their direwolves are the ones with the closest relationships to the Hound. Can you talk about that? Yeah, I mean, it's a good observation. So him being called the Hound is supposedly like to show his loyalty, and also it's a little bit demeaning. You're our pet dog. Do this, pet dog. Do that. But yes, so both Sansa, who properly lost Lady, and Arya, who no longer had Nymeria around. Nymeria is still there, but not with Arya. It is definitely noticeable that it's those 2 who formed the strong relationship with the Hound. Now, one aspect to this which I find fascinating is that there's lots of different characters in the Riverlands. I keep on coming to that. I think this is the bit of the story with the most moving parts for George R. R. Martin to kind of like sift his way through. Which of these different characters? We're talking about the Hound. We've got Nymeria's super pack. We've got Brynden Blackfish Tully. We've got the Garrison from Riverrun. We've got the Brotherhood Without Banners. We've got Brienne. We've got Jenny. We've got this list of all these different groups of people. The order in which they encounter each other could change hugely how the plot develops. And I suspect that's the kind of thing George R. R. Martin does struggle with as a writer. But I do wonder what would happen if Nymeria, the direwolf, ran into the Hound. because the link is very strong still with Arya. And we'll come on to later what feelings Arya actually has about the Hound. But one thing which was very noticeable was that before the end, she stopped saying his name in her prayer, her kill list prayer, which I don't think we can as far as go say that meant that she forgave him, but it did mean that she no longer wanted personally to be killing him. So that you do have to wonder would have to play into how Nymeria the direwolf would feel about encountering the Hound. Perhaps there would be more sort of basic "I'm not going to hurt you," which is Arya could not bring herself at the end to kill the Hound. Would Nymeria not be able to kill Sandor Clegane? It's entirely possible. Roman Lakovets, I'm in the tiny minority of those who never quite liked the Hound. I get what George R. R. Martin was going for with him, but he is just too creepy for my taste. I understand it completely. And he's, yes, he is. I do have to say that, so I completely understand, and I think this is what actually makes him, for me, a good character. It doesn't mean I like him or I'd want to spend time with him personally, but I think what makes him a good character is the fact that he is these extremes of he's clearly brutal, he's clearly capable of terrible things, but at the same time his instinct often is a lot more tender than most other characters there on in the story, which creates this weird juxtaposition that you're never 100% certain where he's going to go. Is it just the people he connects with that can prompt that tenderness, or is there something else? And even within that tenderness, it's not just complete tenderness; it's mixed with violence. Is that I pointed out the times when he cared about Sansa, and but how did he show his care? He put a knife to her throat. That's that. I mean, creepy is one way of putting it. There are other worse words to be using. It was pretty horrible. So he's not a nice character, but he's a very multifaceted and complex one. Okay, let's go to some. Let's have a quick flick through the chat. A reflective rambling saying, "Oh, Sandor is someone who would send me screaming, but I adore him all the same." Yeah, I think. Yeah, I get that. Andrew K saying George R. R. Martin is great at giving complexity and sympathy to certain characters we initially do not like. Yeah, I think that's one of the key things here is that we're set up to not like him. The characters do not like him. He clearly commits horrible things, actions. But then we see another side to him, and we're trying to be sympathetic. We say that sounds like a pretty horrific childhood, where it sounds like your older brother killed your father and your sister and very nearly killed you and left you disfigured for your entire life, to the extent where you felt that the earliest moment you ran from your family home. That should give us some sympathy towards him. And if not, it should at least help us understand why he is like he is. And I think show us a bit about why we should see those elements to him that are wanting innocence and wanting kindness. He just doesn't know how to express it because he's never really experienced that himself. Not sure saying, does the Hound have amnesia? Huge fan, need more House Dane. Yeah, well, there'll be some more House Dane related things coming up soon. Do not worry. Does the Hound have amnesia? I mean, If you're talking about the grave digger, we do not know because we do not encounter him. The kind of prevailing, well, we only see him from afar, basically. The only prevailing fan theories we have are that he is there on some kind of um, personal uh, attempt to atone in some way. Um, one theory, which I don't think we've got huge amounts of evidence for, but it just seems to work and hangs together well. One theory is that he's digging a grave for every person that he's killed as a way to kind of atone for what he's done before. Which I say kind of makes sense. The implication there is that he doesn't have amnesia. He's not forgotten who he was, but he's trying to make right in some way what he had done previously. Let's go to a question from Lorelei Dragon, or perhaps Lorelei. Do seem to be different pronunciations there. Sandor seems to have developed a soft spot for the Stark girls. Why do you think that is? Do you think he will have a similar arc in the books than he did in the show in terms of being softer or kinder? Yeah, so why the Stark girls? Um, I mean, I think a lot of this uh, for Sandor as a whole does come back to his childhood, and clearly the biggest thing there was what happened with his brother, but he also lost a sister, and I think I wonder whether this has brought out something in him, the fact that he's not really had this kind of um, he probably felt he couldn't protect her, and now maybe he can protect someone in a little way. So there's something there. I think Sansa's innocence also really kind of appealed to him in a way that he certainly would have felt that his innocence was lost at a very young age, but she still had hers. Um, and I think that kind of appealed to him. I also suspect he saw a little bit of himself in Arya, in the horrors that had happened to him at a young age. She's had horrors that had happened to her at a young age, and how she's responding with coming up with a kill list. And deep inside Sandor is this anger and rage at his brother. So I think he saw something of himself in her. And um, he's kind of flung into this role of captor. I mean, and it being in charge of them in some way and their protector in some kind of dark way. Um, Neither time was it actually 100% immediately his choice, but this is where events took him to. So with Arya, he hadn't gone intending to kidnap her. He'd gone back intending to try and get his money. But then she was there, and it was like, okay, fine, we'll go with this option instead. Um, will he become softer or kinder? Well, quite possibly. We'll come on to this a bit later about what impact is his time on the Quiet Isle going to have on him. But I think that he certainly seems to have, at the very least, kind of clocked out from what he was about by the fact that he's gone to the Quiet Isle and he's doing what he's basically been told would be good for him, would be good for the community, implies a very different kind of Sandor than we had previously known, who was a man of violence, and now this is somebody who wants to live on. And it's called the Quiet Isle because people aren't allowed to speak, and they just do the things for the benefit of the community. So, yes, certainly while he's there, he definitely seems to be moving down that route. James Perkins saying, hi, Robert. In previous videos, I've heard you discuss the Hound as one of the characters who embodies some of the characteristics of a true knight without actually being a knight, or indeed seeming very knightly at first glance. I was wondering if you could go a bit deeper into that concept of the true knight. Who are the famous true knights of Westerosi history? Are there others of note that we should be aware of that will play a role in the story, either by appearing personally or by influencing and presaging one of our current characters? Are there other true knights who, like the Hound, we might not think of as true knights, but who are? conversely, other characters who we're meant to think of as truly knightly, but are not true knights. Okay, so the true knight is this concept which comes up. Sansa talks about it quite a lot, thinks about it quite a lot. It's really part of this chivalric ideal that she has when she sort of heads down to King's Landing. We also get it mentioned a couple of times in the Dunk and Egg stories. The true knight is somebody who embodies the knightly vows, who does the things that they should do. And the knightly vows, we hear this in Dunk and Egg, the knightly vows might change a little bit, but there's something along the lines of, in the name of the warrior, I charge you to be brave. In the name of the father, I charge you to be just. In the name of the mother, I charge you to defend the young and innocent. In the name of the maid, I charge you to protect all women. So that's what it is: brave, just, defending young, innocent, and women. And so who do we have held up as being these true knights? Well, we get Sir Duncan the Tall, who you see it again and again. He, without even thinking, by instinct, he jumps in to try and protect the innocent, to try and protect the young women in particular. He enacts truth and justice, and protecting the innocent, just by who he is. So is a great example. We get told about Serwyn of the Mirror Shield. Prince Aemon, the Dragon Knight, is often held up as a true knight. So those are probably the ones that we're supposed to look up to and say, wow, these are proper true knights. Then we get a few who we're told are true knights, but we do have to sort of wonder a little bit how true that is. And I think the best example of this is we get three people who we're told are true knights from the same Kingsguard: Sir Barristan, Sir Arthur Dane, and Sir Gerald Hightower. All three of them we're told were true knights. And it is undeniable that they seem to, certainly, we know a bit less about Gerald Hightower, but Sir Barristan the Bold, he's definitely brave. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. According to his own morality, he does seem to try to be just, defending young and innocent and protecting all women. He probably thinks he does those things. But when you look at all of them, and then you say, these are the people who are there defending the Mad King, while the Mad King was performing all manner of injustice. And we even get this moment where Jaime hears they're stationed outside the Targaryen marital bedroom, and they hear sounds that it's very clear something very non-consensual is going on, something quite violent is going on, and Jaime is there wanting to intervene and is told, no, we don't do that. And so I think we're supposed to look at that Kingsguard and go, well, they might have been in many ways good and virtuous, but in many other ways, were they really upholding that vow? But then we come on to what is probably the most interesting part, which is where the Hound here does kind of fit in. Is that George R. R. Martin seems to be having a bit of fun with this idea of the true knight by dropping characters into his story who seem to embody in some way actually what being a true knight is, but actually aren't knights. The classic example is Sir Duncan the Tall, who, when you look at it, I mean, I think I did a video on this ages ago. I might have to reissue that one, but he introduced himself as Sir Duncan the Tall, but all of the clues that we get are that he's not. That's a lie, and he's not really a knight. So he does the things that a true knight would do. He is just, he's brave, he protects the innocent and women, but he's technically not a knight. Then we get Brienne. Brienne, again, seems to embody these kinds of things. She's definitely brave. She's definitely just. She definitely protects the innocent and the like. So, and she's the swan sword to Catelyn Stark, defending women. So she's there as this kind of model of what a true knight should be like. But she's not a knight. She's never been knighted. She can't be knighted. She's a woman. The Hound sort of he's a dark version of this in that there's no way that anyone would say that he's a completely morally upright person. That's not what's going on here. But when you start looking at what he, particularly in relation to Arya and Sansa, he is protecting the young and the innocent, and women. And he is he brave? Yes, we see his bravery. I mean, not least when he has to deal with fire, when he's fighting against Sir Beric Dondarrion, and he's with his fiery sword, and he's got this huge fear of fire, and yet he doesn't let that overcome him. So he has a lot of these attributes. And again, he was a member of the Kingsguard, so he should have been a knight, but actually he wasn't because he refused to be knighted. So we get those three characters who, in different ways, kind of embody elements of the true knight. The other one, just it's probably worth pointing out as a minor character, Sir Dontus. You'll remember Sir Dontus. He was this guy who was like this. He was turned into a fool, a court fool, and he was the one who makes contact with Sansa, facilitating her escape. There's one point when she's getting beat or about to be beat, and he jumps into her defense, and she manages to kind of deflect this and help him, but she thinks back afterwards that Sir Dontus was more of a true knight than any of these others because he bravely and justly leapt in to defend her, defenseless woman. But he no longer is a knight because he'd been stripped of it. So nobody, again, George R. Martin doesn't go in these kind of paragons of virtue. Nobody would say Sir Dontos was a morally highly upright character, but he did have moments when he embodied that. And again, he wasn't a knight. He had been a knight. He no longer was a knight. So this is something that George R. Martin is playing with. Whether we encounter any other characters who are a bit like that, I don't know. It's possible we will, but those are the ones we've got so far. Stephen saying the Hound's helm has changed hands since Sandor's apparent death, first taken by Rourg of the Brave Companions, and then Lemoncloak of the Brotherhood Without Banners. This has led to Riverlords blaming Sandor for Rourg's crimes and trying to hunt him down. What will be the ultimate fate of the helm, and Lem, or anyone else who wears it? How might this affect Sandor's own story? Well, let's take a step back before we come to the details, and just recognize what this represents, kind of in a kind of a literary sense. This represents the Hound. He is no longer the Hound. He is Sandor. The elder brother talks about burying the Hound and putting the Hound's helmet, leaving the Hound's helmet there where the Hound was buried. And Sandor, however, was now at peace. So it's the identity of the Hound, this brutal warrior who was capable of many terrible things, that is embodied by this helmet. And so when Rourg had it and he was committing these atrocities, he was doing it as the Hound, as this kind of character of the Hound. So when Lemoncloak has it, you have to start wondering and worrying that this means that perhaps the Brotherhood Without Banners are going to be doing terrible things, because they are now having the identity of the Hound. There is George R. R. Martin has done this helmet thing another place as well in the story with Gendry, who, as a blacksmith, made a helmet, a bull's head helmet, and this is sort of kind of reminiscent of the Baratheons. They're obviously like they've adopted this kind of the storms and things like that as their kind of sigils, but this idea of like a bull's head is very Robert Baratheon-y. And we're told he makes this this bull head helmet, but he doesn't use it. He polishes it, he carries it around with him, but he doesn't use it until once he puts it on and like goes charging into battle. And it's as if wearing the helmet, that this is his secret identity, that even he doesn't know. Wearing the helmet, he can transform into what his birthright was. But the rest of the time, he just carries it around as if he doesn't really know what this means. So, what does this mean for the story? As I say, I think it probably bodes pretty ill for the Brotherhood without banners. But more than that, I do wonder whether we're going to get a moment when the Hound gets the opportunity to get his helmet back. When he's, I just imagine him like holding it up in front of him. Got to choose. Am I going to go back to being the Hound, or have I left that behind me? I think it's the kind of thing as we've had set up so very clearly what this kind of sort of represents. I think that George R. R. Martin won't be able to resist giving the opportunity for this not only to be sort of passed around other people to, oh, well, now it's your turn, you can be a bit like the Hound. Actually, that coming back to the Hound and the Hound deciding which identity he's taking on. Is he the Hound still? Or is he now Sandor Clegane? Because the two are very different in a sort of character and personality, or probably will be very different in terms of character and personality. We have yet to see what kind of character emerges from the Quiet Isle. Right, let's go to a question from Rustler saying, "Good day, Robert, and to you too, sir. I hope you and Dan the dog are well. We are, thank you very much. Actually, I'll just let me take a pause here for one moment. Moderators, thank you so much. You do an amazing job. If you are here watching this live on IDG Live, then please, if you're in the chat, could you just show a little bit of love to the moderators? They're the people who do all the good work, just welcoming people, keeping the conversation going, providing links to stuff that people want, preventing the bots from coming in and disrupting the chat. They do fantastic work. So if you could show them a little bit of love, I would hugely appreciate it. I'd also love to show my appreciation to my patrons. Patrons, thank you. I always try and prioritize your questions because I cannot do this without your support. So thank you hugely. If you do want to support the channel, that's the best way to do it via Patreon. There's probably a link down in the description. You could alternatively support via being a channel member here. There's a link somewhere to that. But one other thing to announce, I think I've said it the last week or so, but if you would find it easier to watch my main videos on my main channel on Spotify, they are now all being uploaded onto Spotify. So I'm doing one a day, so it'll take a little while to sort of catch up with where we're at now. But if you go over to Spotify, just search for Indie Geek, you will find all the videos there being uploaded. So if you would find it easier to go there, then please do that. Okay, let's go. Where were we at? Rustler saying, assuming the Hound does return, how do you foresee him re-entering the story? Will we simply hear about something happening on the Quiet Isle, or will we see it in a POV? Well, we won't see it in his POV, because George R. R. Martin has been clear I mean, he can change his mind, but he's been clear that he's not going to introduce any new main POV characters. We can still have one-offs like prologues, epilogues, for example, but he's not looking to introduce new POV characters, which means that we're not going to see it from his POV. And the only two characters with POVs in the Riverlands at the moment are Jamie and Brienne, who are together and in a different part of the Riverlands. So instinctively, unless we get someone like Arya returning, she could return to the Salt Pans, which is where she left to get a boat to Bravos. And that would leave her not too far from the Quiet Isle, so possibly her. But probably we will just hear about what happened at the Quiet Isle, and it'll only be later then we're left. Maybe we encounter Sandor somewhere. The key question here is, though, although I think it's pretty clear to me that Sandor is going to stay there for the time being unless something happens. He seems to the grave digging thing seems to be working as far as we can tell. We've not spoken to him, but he's there. So the working assumption he's going to carry on being there until something happens. And we've also got plenty of foreshadowing about people attacking or raiding the Quiet Isle. The elder brother seems to be almost half expecting it. Now, that's when this gets interesting, because how will he respond? How will he react to a raiding party coming to this oasis of calm that is now there in his life? Would he run away? Seemed unlikely. Would he stay and fight? Possibly. Or maybe he would be sent to try and get some help. The elder brother won't want himself or anyone else. He's got a very similar story where he used to be a soldier himself, and then the way he talks about it, he died and then sort of was reborn effectively on the Quiet Isle. This is sort of echoing what he's saying happened to the Hound. He doesn't seem to be the type who wants to go back to fighting. So are they going to have to ask for help from someone? The Brotherhood Without Banners, as an example. Who would they send there? Maybe Sandor is the most likely option. So Stephen saying, "Hi Robert and Dan the Hound." See what you did there. During the series, there was the meme, the TV show there was the meme of Clegane Bowl, a final showdown between the two brothers that became so popular it was worked into the show. Do you think there will be some kind of confrontation like that in the novels, or will the story go in a different direction? I have heard that the whole idea of the showdown is wrong for the story on two grounds. Firstly, that there is so little of Sir Gregor left that he is essentially dead and the zombie mountain is a different character. And secondly, that Sandor wanting revenge undermines his character's journey to seeking peace. Perhaps instead, Sandor's resolution will be to take pity on the zombie mountain and give him the gift of mercy. Well, yes, for those who missed it at the time when we were waiting for season 8, in the Game of Thrones community, then there grew up this groundswell of opinion and a desire for a showdown between the Hound and the Mountain. And that became known as Clegane Bowl. And obviously on the show, what happened was that the Hound works his way down to King's Landing at the very end, and he does confront his brother, and he pushes him, jumps with him down off the side of the Red Keep into fire, which kind of like ended all of his narrative arcs there. So is this needed in the books? People felt that they wanted that on the TV show. Is this needed in the books? Well, I certainly accept your point that Gregor Clegane, the mountain, is no more. We now have the zombie mountain, Robert Strong. So he's a different character. But we also have on the other side of the equation, the Hound is no more. We now have Sandor Clegane, who is potentially going to be a different character. So those two characters, it's not like the originals would be fighting each other, but that doesn't mean that this wouldn't provide a sort of a satisfactory ending. And then secondly, would him wanting revenge undermine his character's journey to seeking peace? Well, quite. I think a few points I would make on this. The first is that we are at the halfway point of the narrative across the piece for many characters, and the halfway point, therefore, of their character arcs. So Bran has gone off, spent the first half trying desperately to figure out what's this whole magic thing? I want to walk. No, but you can fly. Ends up Bloodraven's cave. The second half will be once he's had that kind of training. That's the kind of the pivot moment. Jon has this pivot moment up to him being killed, which is around now. Arya has this pivot moment that she's building towards, where she's been on this long character arc about death and identity, and eventually she'll reach the point where she leaves the Assassin's Guild and reasserts her identity as Arya Stark, and so on. You can go through all of these different characters and say they've reached the sort of the extremists of their character arc. That they've got the arc going outbound, and then they've got the arc coming back inbound. That also will apply to Sandor. So his first arc led him to the Quiet Isle. His second arc will be going from there back out symbolically to the beginning, because he doesn't have to just atone for, if we're talking about him as a character whose arcs need some kind of satisfactory ending, he doesn't need just to atone for killing lots of people. He needs to in some way come to terms with what happened in his childhood, because that's where the real trauma comes from, that we see, that touches on everything: his relationship with his brother, the loss of his sister, his fear of fire. All of this stems from his childhood. So he needs a way of resolving that, which does kind of push towards this idea of him actually confronting his brother. Now, does that have to be Clegane Bowl? No, absolutely not. We don't have to have a big fight to end it. I mean, that was quite, I would say, quite a reductionist in the character arc for the Hound, is that we get all of this build up to him becoming a new person, then he has to end it all by fighting someone. That doesn't seem to be where the sort of the natural endpoint of that arc is. So he's got to somehow find peace. Now, that peace he may find, and I've heard this a number of times, this idea that actually it's not to, his endpoint is not to kill his brother out of I want revenge, but to put his revenge on one side and then mercy killing him, actually get rid of him. And that is a much better place for him to be in. And I kind of like that as an idea. People have had that idea since even before season 8, and so when Clegane Bowl happened, it was like, oh, okay, so they went that way instead. So Clegane Bowl itself doesn't have to happen. In fact, I would be a bit disappointed if it ends up in an actual fight. But him reaching some kind of resolution with his childhood, I think, does have to happen. Let's go. Actually, one other further thing to say on that, and all of this is quite speculative based on where we think he's at. We do not know where his mind is at, where his soul is at after his time at the Quiet Isle, because he's not a POV character. We see a sort of softening of him over time, but we haven't seen what we think happened was he was the elder brother prevented him from dying, brought him to the Quiet Isle, gave him this talk about, I understand what you've been through. I was a soldier too, and then I found peace by being here, etc., etc., etc. And Sandor says, "Okay, let's do it. I'm going to try and achieve some redemption for myself by digging these graves, by serving the community, etc., etc." And what we don't know is, was that a grudging thing? Did he feel like he had a debt to pay back? He could just be feeling he has a debt to pay back to the elder brother. Um, we we're not in his head, and we don't know. LykosAfiermenos saying, "Good evening, Robert. Good evening to you. Assuming the Hound is alive, of course, my question is about redemption arcs in A Song of Ice and Fire. There are a lot, and they can't possibly all end positively. Compared to Theon and Jaime, do you think the Hound stands a chance at redemption without the narrative becoming cliche?" Um, well, my take on this is that we don't have lots of redemption arcs in A Song of Ice and Fire. We have, I think, one, which is Theon. Uh, uh, Classically, when we're thinking about a redemption arc, then we've got somebody who did a bad thing, was a bad person, and then suffered the consequences of their actions, and then works their way back and somehow pays for, redeems themselves through actions that make things better. So, for example, the Theon arc, the way it seems to be going is that he did the terrible things, betrayed the Starks, killed the Miller's boys, and then he's been suffering now the results of all of the things that he's been doing. But slowly, he's working his way back through acts to uh, pay off his debt in some way. So, for example, he's saving fake Arya, Jane Poole. Now, it's not actually a Stark. He's not saved the life of an actual Stark, but he has saved the life of someone that people think is a Stark, which is a sort of a mirror for he didn't actually kill Bran and Rickon, but he killed people that people and made people think that they were Bran and Rickon. So we've got that kind of arc there. He should end up on the trajectory we've got for him. He should end up in some way, perhaps sacrificing himself to save one or other of the Starks. So and I think they tried to do this on the TV show. You remember the way that Theon died was standing in the way of Bran. So when the Night King was starting to come towards him, which I thought about 3 seconds as far as I could tell, but the point, the narrative point was that he was sacrificing himself for the Starks, for Bran, who everyone had thought that he'd actually killed. So Theon, I think, has got, or looks like at the moment, we'll have to wait and see, looks like he's going on a classical redemption arc. Jaime is more complex in that, yes, Jaime's done bad things, but the thing that everybody holds up as being this is what we're calling him, Oathbreaker, for the rest of the days, Kingslayer. This terrible crime actually was the greatest act of virtue that he's probably done, which is save the lives of 500,000 Kingslanders. So his arc is not just I'm going to somehow pay back for all the evil deeds I've done. It's to get recognition for the good deeds he has done and to become more himself because he's allowed the world and his family to shape who he is. So he's moving in that direction to the point where at some point he's already started getting this from Brienne. The people he care about will recognize what he has done. So that's his arc, and it's not a classical redemption one. And it may well end up. I mean, I know a lot of people hated it on the TV show, but don't I wouldn't say it's definitely not going to happen. Him going back to Cersei, um, because he could realize actually, you know what, we have so much of this foreshadowing of uh, when she dies, I die kind of thing. Is that they almost certainly will die together, and his bond to her, his twin, is of course very strong. So don't rule out um, a kink at the end of that one. I don't think he's going to have this kind of classical redemption arc. Um, and the Hound, the Sandor, may I don't think his redemption arc is um, making good for the evil that he's done. He's sort of doing a bit of that with this grave digging thing, possibly, but I suspect it's his arc is more about coming to terms with or being at peace with the horrendous things that happened to him when he was young. That is where his arc is heading. It's not a redemption. It's a being at peace. And this is why I said the Clegane Bowl idea works not as in a fight, but the idea that there has to be some kind of ultimate confrontation, point of decision, something along those lines for Sandor and Gregor, because well, that could turn in a number of different ways and be morally and in a story sense satisfying as well. Is that he could go there and, as we talked earlier, he could mercy kill Robert Strong, and that could be a satisfying end for him. Or he could go there fully intending to kill him and then decide not to and just have mercy then and say, I don't need this. I'm going to be the better person. And my life is not going to be run by revenge. And that would also end in a kind of a satisfying way. Um, I do wonder whether, again, they kind of touched on this in the show, but I wonder whether this is like going to play out in a much stronger way in the books. Is that if you remember in the show, he went back with Arya, and she's got her kill list, and he's there basically. He's got his kill list of one, his brother, and they're breaking into the Red Keep, and he basically turns to her and says, "Don't do this. Don't go down my route. I'm too far gone. I have to go down this route now. But you've got the whole of your life ahead of you. Release the list." I do wonder whether we're going to get some element of that happening with him and Arya towards the end, when he sees what she has become, and he sees how anger and a desire for revenge has shaped his own life, and in not good ways. And he taking on this kind of weird mentor role that he's had before can say to her, give that up. It's not worth it. And that would potentially lead Arya to a better place as well. Because if Arya then does give up on that, it is giving up its hold that it has over her. So I kind of like that, but that's not it's not a redemption arc. It's an arc moving to a place of that is satisfying. I'll go a quick flick through the chat. Cannibal the Dragon says Sandor needs to be a chicken farmer. He sells chicken to people. Yeah. I don't think Andrew Kay saying I don't think he can just let the zombie mountain not be killed. He is one of the few that can take him out. Yes, I mean, there's a practical thing here. Now, again, the show. I don't want to lean heavily on the show here for obvious reasons, but I found it quite interesting that he managed to have that talk with Arya, which, as I said, works well for me with the book kind of. Stories that we've got going on here, the themes that we've got with the book, for him to reach a point where he says to her, "No, let go of it," and but he couldn't, and he went on and killed the Robert Strong. Perhaps then this is where this could go. He could persuade Arya to give it up, but he has to, for his own sake, he has to confront his brother. And when he discovers what his brother is like, Zombie Mountain, when he discovers that, he does do the mercy killing. So it's not, I now have to fight him to let out all of my anger and revenge against him, but it's like, actually, I want to give you the mercy in the way that Arya couldn't give him the mercy killing, but then later thought, I should have done that. He can look to Robert Strong and go, actually, I want to give him a mercy killing. Yeah, so just people talking just very briefly about uh, the show. For those who sort of missed it, we talked about it a lot at the time. Were these things that George R. R. Martin told them or not? It's actually quite hard to tell. He did a big hand at some point between, I think, seasons 4 and 5. Seasons 1 to 4, George R. R. Martin was relatively involved. He wasn't a showrunner or anything like that, but he wrote an episode for each of the first 4 seasons. You can go check it out. He's got the writing credit for one episode in each of the first 4 seasons. But then after that, he took a big step back. And he did a handover meeting with the showrunners, which lasted a few days, and he talked through the fates, where the story was going to go, the fates of the main characters. He admitted he didn't get to some of the smaller characters, but he told them everything that was going to be happening, or at least he was expecting it to happen. He's a Gardner writer, etc., etc. Things could change. And then he took the step back, and then when he was asked while the show was on, is this what's going to happen in the book? And he says, I remember there's one blog post where he said yes and no, and yes and no, and yes and no. The big beats of the story are the same. Many of the details are different. So those are kind of the things that he was saying at the time, which is basically, don't disregard it as being, none of that is going to be anything resembling what's going to happen. Some of the things that are on there will happen in the books, but probably in very different ways. And the bigger beats are the ones that are more likely to actually happen. Giulio saying, who's a channel member here, thank you, saying, do you agree with the Hound that the reality of what knighthood is in Westeros, violent, hateful, nihilistic? Are there other knights like him? It's hard to look at the knights as a whole that we've seen in Westeros and think, wow, what a fine, upstanding community of people. A sizable proportion of them simply aren't. And so the knightly virtue idea, the true knight idea, is therefore quite rare. But the Hound had certainly on the TV show, had a tendency to talk in absolutes. There's no true knights, etc., etc. The way that George R. R. Martin would, I suspect, want us to look at it is there's a spectrum out here. You get some characters who are very good and very upright, you get some who do great good things, but also mixed with some pretty terrible ones as well. Jaime Lannister, as an example. And there are some knights who you would look at the Mountain, for example, and struggle to see any hint of knightly virtue there. So, yeah, I think the broad answer is that this is reflective of his worldview. It isn't necessarily the case uh, that George R. R. Martin would say describing his world. Cat Sense saying Brienne and the Hound are the only true knights in the Song of Ice and Fire. I mean, it's um, uh, hard to disagree with that. Agree. Weirwood's asking, does Zombie Mountain eat? Does he run on magic? Does he need transfusions regularly? Does he eat chicken if the dragon has 3 heads? So my working hypothesis is that the Zombie Mountain does not have a head. They basically soldered the helmet onto the rest of the suit of armor, and we get people saying, I can't see anything in those eye sockets. It's just darkness. No one has ever seen him eat anything. So I think the idea is that he's animated by magic in some way, but he's his head was the head that went down to Dawn. For his own sake, Kelly Faunt saying, for his own sake, Sandor needs to confront the Hound. Yeah, so I mean, I talked about this idea of like the Sandor coming up with the opportunity to get his helmet back and having to choose um, whether he wants to embrace that part of who he is again. Equally captivating would be this idea that he faces somebody wearing his old helmet, and then he has to kill the Hound once more. And then what does he do with the helmet? Does he then throw the helmet away again, or does he then, having killed the Hound, become the Hound? So that's it's a really kind of evocative idea. I'm convinced that the story of the helmet is not over. Question from Roman Lakovets. What do you think Lem will do now that he has the Hound's helmet? Well, he is indeed a jaded man. He doesn't seem to be as cruel as Rourke. He doesn't. But he is one of the most loyal, seemingly, members of the Brotherhood Without Banners, loyal to Lady Stoneheart, who is lacking in empathy and care, and is very bloodthirsty for anyone she thinks is even remotely connected with the harms that were done to her family. So she is not enacting these terrible things herself. She's getting the Brotherhood to be doing the things. So he could be involved. Now, something I will do a video on this at some point, but something which is very in the air is there's going to be a big wedding at River Run, and can she resist the idea of ruining a wedding between the Lannisters and the Freys? I don't think she can. Red Wedding 2.0. And then imagine if the character who is seen to be leading this is wearing the Hound's helmet. It would all get blamed on him. So, and not her, because nobody knows that she's well, a few people, but the main sort of leaders of the factions do not. So, will he perform terrible things? Quite possibly, but on behalf of Lady Stoneheart. Right, let's go to a question from Dominic Vaughan saying, "Hi, Robert. How are you, sir? Very well, thank you. How do you see Sandor's story ending? Clegane Bowl or a redemption arc light? I actually quite liked how the show reunited him with Thoros, etc. Also, if they interact with the Winds of Winter and Dream of Spring, how do you foresee he and Arya interacting?" Right. So, I sort of touched on the. I've talked about the redemption arc and Clegane Bowl a moment ago, so I hope you'll forgive me answering more the second half of your questions about how he deals with Arya, which I did touch on, but I think this is worth pointing out. Where their arcs have gone is that she has gone from where she was uh, off to train as this assassin. If they meet again, she will come back as this deadly assassin who is there with this very clear list of people that she wants to kill in Westeros for revenge. He, however, will have gone from being this guy who was full of this desire for revenge against his brother and willingness to kill people all over the place. He perhaps will have reached a point of greater peace within himself where he no longer feels that drive. That would create a completely different dynamic to where they were before. And there's it's if an element of if Sandor looks at Arya and thinks, I was partly responsible for that, because he was her responsible adult for a good portion of time as she was growing up, and showed her an incredibly violent lifestyle, and she learned from that. Undoubtedly, she learned from that, and she's just carried on down that path. So he may still see himself in this kind of slightly paternalistic way towards her, but in other senses, their roles have kind of reversed, which does lead to this idea that his last teaching to her could be something along the lines of, don't do this. You don't have to kill all these people. You can be better than this. Look at me. I uh, I know you're a bit like I was way back then. I've moved even further down the path, and I've seen quite what kind of person this leads you to become. I don't want you to become that person. Um, Cindy saying, "Caught one, just got home from work. Welcome. Good to see you." Let's go to a question from Kristen H saying, "Hi, Robert. What is your opinion of Sandor's moral compass? I was reading a Reddit thread that discussed his killing of Micah as an act of mercy because the chances were high Joffrey would have tortured Micah. What do you think about that?" Uh, I think at the time he was just doing his job, and he got told to go off and run down and collect Micah, and he did it. So the the slight nuance that I don't know whether this played into this at all, but he was there supposed to be guarding Joffrey, and then Joffrey basically relieved him of his duties and said, "No, I'm just going to wander down this river here with Sansa." And the Hound seemingly went, "Okay," and then left him to it. And therefore, the Hound wasn't there to protect Joffrey when he got bitten by a direwolf. So perhaps at this point, the Hound is thinking, I better do this bit right. There's no messing around here. Cersei, you know, is not the most understanding of people, so she may well be. If I go, yes, but I mean, I know I let Joffrey get hurt, but he told me to stay away, and she would say, "Well, don't listen to him. Your job is not to do that. Your job is to look after him." So uh, perhaps there's an element of just doing his job. Perhaps there's an element of trying to make up for not dereliction of duty, but not being there when he could have been there. Um, uh, is there a possibility that he was trying to be merciful? Yes, but without the POV, then I don't think we can ever say that with any degree of certainty. My general take is that we see the shift in his character when two things happen. First of all, when he has that kind of heart-to-heart with Sansa, and he tells her about his past. And secondly, when he leaps in to confront his brother and fight him. Because for all this talk of Clegane Bowl, we've had a Clegane Bowl already. We've had the two of them fighting. It's just that they got stopped by King Robert. So I think at that point, he realized the huge anger. He'd been on the run from his brother for a long time by then. He'd been basically trying to avoid him, and making sure that he was somewhere where he was serving the people that the mountain couldn't get at. So he's confronted his brother, and he's had this awakening of this kind of dormant, looking after the little sister kind of idea, and tapping into the terrors of his youth, which he didn't seem to tell people about generally. So I think that was the turning point for him. And before that, he was just being the Hound and doing his job. We don't see any hint of this kind of empathy or sympathy before we get those two turning moments. Northern Tommy saying, I still haven't seen Dan the doggy. I promise I will put up a picture at some point. My bad. Martin S., how many Joffreys of brute physical strength does Sandor the Hound Clegane have? I don't know, quite a few. I don't think George R. Martin goes into so, but just in terms of his height, he's described as 6.5 feet tall, which for those who don't work in feet and inches is over 2 meters. He's described as being taller than Brienne. He's taller than Robert Baratheon. Those are both notably physically imposing characters. So he's taller than them. Only Hodor, Sid Duncan the Tall, and the Mountain, out of main characters, are and John Umber as well, are sort of noted as being taller than him. He is the kind of character who stands out for being hugely physically imposing. So Joffrey, no, he's basically still a child, a teenager, but at best. He 3 or 4. Let's go with that. But he was an incredibly imposing figure. Effective branding. Yes. Okay. I'll try and post a damn picture on Instagram. Let's go to Diego Godoy saying, Hola, Robert. Hola to you. Earlier today, I was rereading Arya's last chapter in A Storm of Swords, when Arya and the Hound go their separate ways. Well, she leaves him to die by a tree. When reciting her kill list, Arya seems to forget to include the Hound in it, and she has an internal debate as to whether that was intentional or not. What are your thoughts on this? Did she unconsciously forgive him by this point? Right. This I think is very complex. There are some people who say, "Oh, well, that is quite obvious. She clearly forgiven him by this point." There are others who say if you read the passage from Arya's perspective, then the reason why she doesn't give him the gift of mercy, she says at the time, she thinks at the time is no, he doesn't deserve the gift of mercy. So it's like, let him suffer. So what's going on? The subconsciously, and it was subconsciously leaving him off of her list, I think is quite telling. That she no longer wants to be killing him. Why? Well, they'd kind of grown a bond, and he had saved her life a few times. And we also get this. I mean, it's quite sad in a way. She thinks back to remember Micah, and now she can't really remember what exactly he looked like. And she thinks, well, all they really did was like play it fighting with sticks, and that was it. I mean, he wasn't family. So it's like she's almost downplaying it in her mind. So clearly there's been a shift. That I think is beyond doubt. She doesn't feel the same about the mountain, about killing the mountain, as she used to. Um, I think it's noticeable how when she does the act of just leaving him to die, is that she thinks that he doesn't deserve to be given the gift of mercy. And it's almost presented as a cruel thing on her part. But then later, when we're getting more of the kind of the faceless men kind of ideology permeating into her, she does think that she should have given him the gift of mercy. So that implies that at that point she thinks of it as a gift. And she thinks she should have given, which implies that there's been even more of a shift over time. I think that the only thing we can conclude categorically that she did subconsciously take him off her list, which seems to imply that she didn't any longer want to kill him. She wasn't sure whether she wanted to cause him pain, though. But the fundamental point is sort of coming back to the Starkish ideology, is that she didn't think that she could look him in the eye and kill him herself. That was quite clear through her actions, through removing him from her list. The idea of her killing him, no, that was definitely gone. She could leave it up to fate to do it, but she was not going to kill him there, either in her prayer or in reality. So I think forgive is probably too strong a word here. I think that she's not said, oh, actually, I know what he did to Micah, but I let that go. I forgive him for what he did. Let us move on. She's not done that, but she couldn't now bring herself to kill him. John Buxton saying, first stream I've been able to catch in a long time. Welcome back. Saying, just popping in to say hi and miss you all. Thanks as ever, Robert. Well, thank you very much. It's fantastic to see you. A member here for 18 months. It's a long time. Thank you so much. And I think I had another question. Yeah, Martin S. Here we go. ChatGPT made this estimate as an answer to my question. The Hound has the brute strength of approximately 10 to 15 Joffreys. There you go, guys. That's how many Joffreys match one Hound. And who am I to doubt the might of ChatGPT? Right, let's have a quick flick through the chat. So Tony Sled saying the Hound low-key saved Arya and he continued her training. Arya isn't dumb. She knows what he did for her the whole way through. Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a big element of that going on as well. Let's go to a question from Gabriel Farrell saying, hi, Robert. I hope you're well. I am. Thank you. Sometimes I feel like that I'm the only person in the fan base who would really like Sandor Clegane to stay on the Quiet Isle throughout the remainder of the story. Finding the peace he thought he'd never experience and letting the persona he'd built up of the Hound die feels to me like an ending that is far more satisfying than Clegane Bowl or him sacrificing himself in the war against the others. I like the idea, too, that his survival remains a little Easter egg for attentive readers. It's possible I'm simply scarred by the show's handling of his resurrection, but what do you think? If we never saw Sandor again, would you be unsatisfied, or do you feel his character needs more involvement in the story? Right, actually, I mean, I'm going to throw this to, I will answer, but I'll throw this to chat, but I'd be fascinated what people think, just in terms of, would you feel satisfied with his arc if we never saw from him again? If the last thing is the presumed dead, but then attentive readers can note, actually, he's probably not dead and he's now living something of an atoning life on the Quiet Isle for the rest of the story. Would that work for you? So I'll come to the chat in just a moment. I'll give my thoughts now, though. I think for him, I would like it. I would love it. I think that would work really well, and I think over time, perhaps he could come to this kind of peace with his past. So I think that would be an excellent thing for him. There is a sort of a justice issue here that has partly been addressed by the fact that he did have a trial of sorts by the Brotherhood Without Banners and was found innocent. That, though, does kind of rankle a little bit because it's like we know he wasn't innocent of what happened with Micah. So the idea that, oh well, maybe the Red Gods got something for him to do, that doesn't quite wash. But if he was just left there, uh, I could assume that he would come to some kind of spiritual peace, and I think for him personally, I think I'd be quite happy. But firstly, I don't think it will happen because all of the hints that the Quiet Isle will get attacked, and secondly, I actually quite want to see this new version of the Hound, new Sandor. I want to see the having come to terms with what his brother did, because that for me is the sort of the key thing, is that we could leave him on the island, and yeah, that would be nice. But I still wouldn't know. It's not just I wouldn't know whether he's alive or dead. I wouldn't know personally if he did achieve that peace. I'd like to see it. So Tony said, the Hound does not get credit as a political force. Intellectually speaking, he was literally at court and saw everything. He knows who betrayed who. Yes, this is true. So it's sort of it was sort of underplayed, certainly on the TV show, but he's one of those people who, if he did end up anywhere near Littlefinger, he would know that Littlefinger was behind the betrayal of the Starks. And if they did both end up in Winterfell, that's a long way away. Obviously, if they do, but if they did ever, he would be able to say, well, yes. Yeah, so the Ned Stark was betrayed by Littlefinger, and that will suddenly leave Littlefinger incredibly vulnerable. So I don't know whether I'd call him a political force, but he's somebody who knows where the body's buried, so to speak. And that could be incredibly important. And I don't talk about he could tell everyone what Littlefinger did as just sort of like, oh, that's a theoretical thing he could do. If he still cares in some way for Sansa, and he thinks that Littlefinger has control over her and means her no good, this is a way that he could get rid of him. Right, let's have a quick flick through the chat. George saying, I much prefer Sandor staying out of the story. Andrew K saying, wouldn't mind him staying out, but just don't see George R. R. Martin leaving it there. So Tony Stead talking about wanting to see Hound and the Sansa sort of connect. Yes, so Lady Pushkin saying, you haven't had a Game of Thrones AI makeover yet on ChatGPT. I didn't know that was there was such a thing. But the answer is no, I have not. But Lady Pushkin's actually, we've got a question from you saying, hi, Robert. I really hope that Sandor has some sort of happy ending, if that is possible in this world, or at least some peace. However, I'm skeptical. What do you predict for him? I assume we're thinking he is the Gravedigger. Yes, absolutely. I think I'm 95% certain he's the Gravedigger. All the clues are there. And so I didn't give you all of the clues, but the horse stranger, his horse that apparently responds to no one else, is there. This character who is this physically imposing height, which is incredibly rare. A face covering, which you'd need to have, given if half your face is burned off, people would recognize you. He had a limp, where we know that uh, Sandor got an injury in that last fight he was in, and he even at one point he sort of bends down to pat a dog, and it's like, is this a hint about the Hound, perhaps? So yes, the way that the elder brother talks about it, it seems very likely that he is indeed the gravedigger. So. Uh, what counts as a happy ending for the Hound? I mean, for me, I think it is this coming to terms in some way with everything that's happened to him and everything that he has done. Uh, he has had a role to play in protecting Arya and Sansa, and I do wonder whether that might continue in some way. Perhaps Arya doesn't need protecting anymore, but perhaps Sansa does, and perhaps he could um, keep up that role of protecting her. If she is going to be Lady of Winterfell, then she will need sworn swords. So that's a possibility of where that one could go to. I also wonder, and I go both ways on this as to whether I think it's a nice idea or a really terrible idea. What if he got knighted? His whole thing about I don't want to be a knight, all knights are terrible, that is predicated on the existence of his brother. And if his brother has gone, and if perhaps he does get a good role model as a knight, maybe he finds Brienne, stumbles across Brienne, and it's like, actually, that's what being a knight is about. So maybe he could become knighted after hating this idea for so long. I mean, on the TV show, it was an amazing moment in the last season, probably the best moment in the last season, to be honest, when Jaime knighted Brienne. Uh, there's no reason to think that it's only her who could be knighted. What if the other true knight, in inverted commas, is also knighted? Um, And let's go to Orion's Orcas saying, I do think that he's the gravedigger, and I think he's tired. Have you ever heard the phrase, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired? That's the feeling I get from him, pleading with Arya to kill him. Not every character has to have a redemption arc or go back to the insanity, do they? No, I agree, they don't. I don't think George R. R. Martin will, at this point. Remember, we're still at that midway point in arcs, really, at the extreme end of a lot of these arcs. I don't think he's going to let him have that now. Might he allow him to have the rest? Yes. And it might be, I've kind of skirted around this, but for all of this talk of things that would make his end satisfactory, him just saying, that's it now. I've achieved everything. I've reached peace with myself. Him actually dying in some way might be, and lots of people will die, might be where we're heading with this. He doesn't come across as the kind of character who's going to survive into the new age. Let's go to Zach. Saying, hello, Robert. I hope you're doing well. I am, thank you. My question is on the relationship between Sandor and Gregor. I think the show makes it much more clear that Sandor hates Gregor. In the books, I think the only real hints of it we get from Sandor himself are just one or two comments to Arya along the lines of, maybe I'll tell my brother he captured a Stark girl without knowing it before I cut his heart out, or if Robb takes me as his man, maybe I'll kill Gregor for him. But the elder brother tells Brienne about how Sandor was mostly driven by the hate of his brother. But I feel it's not such a big plot point as in the show. Are there more hints that I'm forgetting about? And do you think their relationship will end up mattering in the future books, considering where most fans think these characters are heading, i.e. Gravedigger and Robert Strong? Okay, so I don't think you're necessarily missing the sort of the spoken quotes, people saying this kind of stuff. We don't have a POV from his perspective, but we can see his actions. And at the turning of the hand, he jumps in to fight the mountain when he thinks that there's something, yeah, his brother has done something wrong. He doesn't just stand there and boo. He leaps in and fights his brother in front of everyone. So that's a really strong show don't tell hint about what's really motivating him. There's the detail that the very day his brother inherited, he left. That wasn't like oh well, I'll see how this is gonna go. I'll see how it pans out. The moment his brother was the lord of the manor, he was gone. Again, it's a show don't tell. It's we can just tell. It's like he did not want to be there. There's the not wanting to be a knight thing. That is primarily because he can see his brother as a knight and he doesn't want to be like that. And that sours the very idea of knights for him. And there's obviously the fire thing. This affects him. I think it's quite often sort of glossed over, but what happened at the Battle of the Blackwater was massive. He had been seen as the most loyal of the retainers for the Lannisters, and then the fire freaked him out so much that he threw away everything to become an enemy of the state on the run from the most powerful family there is. And it's just because of the fire freaked him out, and the build up, obviously lots of other things, but that was the trigger. And the fire he hates because of what his brother did. So again, we get this yes, you can find some references of him saying certain things, but I think the real evidence of how he feels about his brother comes from the show don't tell. It's the what he does rather than what he says. Tony Sled saying, or Sir Tony Sled, I should say, saying Sandor's inner peace could be from hearing of Oberyn slaying the mountain on the road too. It's a big piece of gossip that would have been on the road. Yeah, it's entirely possible. He might get inner peace from that, but then he might discover here that the mountain is back. Robert Strong is there. So it wouldn't be final in a piece. That would be just for a little moment. Richard Cancro saying, completely unrelated question. I was rereading book 1. Who was the hooded lord with the red beard that paid for Gendry's apprenticeship? Right, so almost certainly this was Varys. So Varys knew where all of Robert Baratheon's bastard children were, and he kept an eye on them. And so Varys is a master of disguises, a red beard and a hood. He turns up and pays for the apprenticeship. I always wondered what Sansa did with his cloak. The cloak that he left in her room when he abandoned his post, she hid in her trunk. And then it was there while she was in King's Landing, but then she sort of escaped quickly and didn't therefore take her stuff with her, so it got left there. Let's go to Keith Boynton saying, not sure if you speculated on this before, but is it possible that the unkiss is the result of someone tampering with Sansa's dreams or memories? A blame Bloodraven candidate? I feel like the explanation is going to be something more narratively relevant than just the effect of her own trauma and confused mental state. And Sir Steve the O says, the kiss that never was between Sansa and Sandor. What's going on there? I think you may have mentioned the unreliable narrator before, but is this setting something up for a future plotline? Is this going to impact on Sansa and/or Sandor going forward, or just setting up the point that POVs may not always be reliable and we need to treat all chapters with some skepticism? So the unkiss. I touched on this a bit in my introduction, but this is at that moment we were talking about when Battle of the Blackwater happens. He freaks out. He decides he's going to go. But he doesn't immediately run away. He goes up to Sansa's room and waits for her. And then when she comes in, he's there. He's drunk by this point. He's there, and he basically offers to take her with him. And she refuses. But then it's all creepy is perhaps one word, but there are others, I'm sure. He demands a song from her, little bird, puts a knife up to her throat. She sings a song, and he goes, takes off his cloak, and leaves. And we see that happen. And then a couple of times later on, she remembers back to that moment, and she remembers him kissing her. And that has caused a few questions, obviously, in the fandom, because it's like, he didn't. We saw it from her perspective. She would have said that from her perspective. So this is what George R. R. Martin has said about it, because he has been asked about it. And he says, "You will see in A Storm of Swords and later volumes that Sansa remembers the Hound kissing her the night he came to her bedroom. But if you look at the scene, he never does. That will eventually mean something, but now it's a subtle touch, something most of the readers may not even pick up on. File this one under unreliable narrator and feel free to ponder its meaning." So at a high level, we have to acknowledge, yes, this is unreliable narrator. This is George R. R. Martin saying you can't believe everything that we're reading from these characters, and this does take it to another level, because what we've got often with characters like Cersei is that she clearly we can see her thought processes, and we can just say, well, she clearly deluded. She does not understand the world around her. But Sansa here has clearly not just forgotten something, but her bad memory, but she's added in a memory, something that's happened. Um, she's started to believe an untruth about herself and what happened about herself. So, what is going on? Well, I'll start with what is a. I mean, I came across this theory relatively recently, and I have to admit it is quite convincing. It's also a bit disconcerting, but if you read the passage, this is what the full passage or the slightly wider context for when Sansa is remembering this kiss that never happened. Sansa wondered what Mega, this is a friend of hers, would think about kissing the Hound as she had. He'd come to her the night of the battle, stinking of wine and blood. He kissed me and threatened to kill me and made me sing him a song. And then immediately after that, "King Joffrey has such beautiful lips," Mega gushed, oblivious. "Oh, poor Sansa, how your heart must have broken when you lost him." And then, she thinks back, "Joffrey made me weep more often than you know." So we have this idea of he kissed me, and then immediately her friend says, "Joffrey has such beautiful lips." And then when she's like, "You must have really missed Joffrey," and Sansa's thought is, "He hurt me." The thought, as I say, it's a disconcerting thought, but the thought is that perhaps Sansa has conflated two memories in her mind. The Hound, who comes across as this kind of vicious character, strong, overpowering, and Joffrey, who several times perhaps joked, perhaps not, that it didn't actually matter whether or not she married him or married someone else or whatever. He was the king and he could have any woman he wanted. Perhaps this is actually rather darkly her conflating two memories and having blanked out the horrors of Joffrey separately coming to her room and forcing himself on her. So that's something, the more I think about it, that I don't like the idea, but it it does kind of work. But more broadly, I think we have to say is that we have to wonder what this George R. R. Martin is saying. This is going to mean something. This right now is just like a hint of something. We do have to wonder whether this is developing Sansa as an unreliable character reinventing her past. Is that what's going to happen? Is that Sansa is not just misremembering something, but creating an entire different memory for herself? Is she going to get so in character as Elaine that she can almost believe herself into different histories, different characters? Certainly, Arya has been taking on new characters. Is Sansa going to be going down this route? Is Sansa going to be not just thinking as Arya does? She kind of like she's almost second guessing herself half the time. You can see in her brain she says, "Yeah, oh, Mercy would do this." When she's being in the character as Mercy, Mercy would never do that, and it's like she's figuring out how to play the character of Mercy. Is Sansa going even deeper and just becoming the memories, the false memories? It's a really tricky one, and then I don't think that any of these answers that we have for what happened with the Unkis are particularly nice ones. Whether this is Sansa herself in some way just starting to become an extremely unreliable narrator, whether this is hiding some trauma or whatever, none of it is good. So Tony said, saying Sansa blanks out with Tyrion and the Tyrells too. Yeah, it's there's something going on here. Maybe I'll dig into it in a bit more detail. But there's Sansa is. George R. Martin says that he deals with the unreliable narrator, but we don't actually see many obvious and concrete examples of it. We get little hints. There's the one I love with Melisandre when we get her using the word snow. And when she's saying it from her perspective, the word snow is with a capital S. This is Jon Snow. But the other people hearing it, the lower case S, they think that she's talking about snow on the ground. So there's a bit of that, but then we also have to wonder, some characters just interpret the world in strange ways, like Cersei. But are we going to get characters who are actually going to have some kind of what I guess we might call mental health conditions? If we have characters who are just seeing different things, remembering things that did not happen, that if we're having a POV chapter from somebody who's going through something serious like that, I mean, it would require some incredibly good writing, but that would take this story to yet another level. Andrew Kay saying, look at what Sansa was going through at that point. Completely understandable to idealize and conflate. Carl Karsnark saying, eyewitness testimony is the least reliable and easiest to corrupt, which is why we're trying to record things as much as possible. Yeah, there's a lot. Jerby saying it definitely rings of PTSD and dissociation. There's a lot going on there. Tony Sled saying she's recalling Joffrey. Yeah, so yeah, it's not a pleasant thing to be thinking about. But as Carl Karsnark says, he certainly did it on purpose to have repercussions later. This isn't just a throwaway random thing. It's like, oh, that might be quite fun. She misremembered something. This is going to have implications later for her, possibly for the Hound, but probably more likely for the story. So, this, as in this stream, we're talking about the Hound. I think I should probably say, I don't think that the important thing here is her remembering the Hound doing this. Perhaps she and he will meet up again. Perhaps there'll be some sort of misunderstanding with that, but I don't think that's the key thing. I think the key thing is her misremembering. That's the thing we're supposed to be focusing on, not who she was misremembering it with. Let's go to a question from. Oh, actually, I've come to. That's the end of my patrons' questions about the Hound, about Sandor. So now is a good time to drop any more questions into the chat. I will answer as many as I can. I have got one more question from one of my patrons. This is Al Had saying, apologies for asking off topic. This question is inspired by the recent video about the Blackfish. Will Jamie and the Blackfish meet again? If yes, then what would that scene would be about, given that most probably Ed Muir had told him about the last conversation he had with Jamie, and you should have kept what Jamie thinks to Blackfish's question, do you know what honor is? Yeah, in that last bit, it's actually quite funny, although uh, you read it and it's the what? They have a conversation, the two of them. The Blackfish and Jamie. Blackfish is in River Run. Jamie's outside. He's basically saying, "Give up the castle. You've not got a chance." And Jamie's sort of saying, if you give up Jane Westling, you have my word of honor that she'll be safe. And then Blackfish kind of shouts down, you don't even know what honor is. And Jamie thinks, a horse. And then he carries on the conversation. And it's like, what? Honor is all. And yeah, one of his horses is called Honor. So it's like it's just a fun little thing. This is where Jamie's mind goes. You don't know what honor is. He doesn't take it as an insult. Is I do. Honor's my horse. But it does also remind us about quite how many of these similar things Jamie is surrounded by: Oathkeeper, honor. It's as if he himself is keeping hold of this idea that he was a good man, or a man who did a very good deed, um, even if the world holds him in great contempt for what he did. But the question you're asking, will they meet again, Jamie and the Blackfish? I think they probably will. Jamie, he thinks to himself at one point that really he can relax, he can head back to King's Landing, knowing that the Riverlands is secure for the Lannisters only when he's captured the Blackfish. Brynden Blackfish Tully is held in very high regard by everyone. He's a strong fighter. He knows the area. He's clearly very strongly loyal to the Tullys. Exactly the kind of person you don't want masterminding the defense of the Riverlands. So Jamie thinks, if I get rid of him, that's fine. I'm done at that point, which means that he's going to carry on thinking about how he gets hold of him. And the Blackfish himself will be thinking, how do I get hold of, because he's being commissioned with protecting Jane Westerling and sort of holding the Riverlands. And once he's dealt with the trying to get Jane Westerling back, he will be trying to regain the Riverlands. That's just what he's trying to do right now. And Jamie is there until further notice. Yes, he's gone off with Brienne, but until further notice, he's in the Riverlands to try and secure it for the Lannisters. Pardon me. So the two of them will inevitably meet again at some point. And I do wonder whether I mentioned it briefly earlier again. Red Wedding 2.0 in River Run. Might Jamie be there for a bit and then disappear before it all goes wrong? That's entirely possible. Tony Sled. So Tony Sled saying Sansa embodying the words the North remembers. Yeah, exactly. The North does not remember. Reflective Rambling, picking up a question for Boons4549. Thank you. I love it when people do this, pick up questions for others. Could he be sent or have interaction with Lady Stoneheart? This is the Hound. Would she know or be able to tell that he had helped her children? Okay, so I said earlier how might, this is the big unknown. if he's there on the Quiet Isle, how might he be coming off of the Quiet Isle? Otherwise, he is staying there and irrelevant to the plot of the story going on. How might he go there? Well, if we assume that the Quiet Isle will be attacked, or there will be a plan to attack it, it can't really defend itself. So the logical thing for the elder brother to do would be to go for help from who? The Brotherhood Without Banners, perhaps. Everybody's heard about them. They're going around the Riverlands. Certainly, if you've heard about what Beric was up to, then doing good deeds. So could he send him out to try and contact the Brotherhood Without Banners, given the fact that he knows where they were, because he'd been captured by them before? So he's got a better chance than anyone of being able to contact them. Might he go out there to try and find the Brotherhood, to try and get them to help defend the Quiet Isle? Yeah, that makes sense for how he could be emerging from here. But of course, he's not going to find Beric. He's going to find Lady Stoneheart. And then the second part of that, would she know or be able to tell that he had helped her children? So some members of the Brotherhood Without Banners has kind of split. Some people have gone off, some people have stayed there. But some members of the Brotherhood will be around and will probably have heard stories of what happened, and what happened when he was there and I was there. And they will probably have, first of all, they will probably say, we think he captured her and went off. And then they might have heard stories of him at the crossroads, perhaps. They might have heard stories of him with her at one of those villages that they stopped in the Riverlands, where they were just like repairing palisades and things like that. So it's entirely possible that a lot of very mixed messages would have come back, and she will then have to make a decision about whether she does what she instinctively will want to, which is kill Lannister sympathizers, or whether she's going to go for another route. I think he would welcome, perhaps he would welcome death. So I don't think, unlike Brienne, who was not wanting to die, I don't think he would be particularly fighting it at this point. Okay, and with that, that was my last. So I've done all the questions for my patrons. Let's have a quick flick through my chat. Brendan Hunt saying, I missed some of those older Tower of Joy videos. They seem to be removed. Hope he updates them soon. They're on my go-to sleepy playlist. Well, absolutely, they are coming back. I will be doing. I'm sort of holding off on some of them for the stage play, I'll be honest, because we will learn hopefully so much from that stage play in terms of what was happening at the tourney at Harrenhal, which might affect a huge amount about our understanding of that. So I will be redoing them, but not not in the next few months. And reflective rambling, yes, good point. Even when somebody talks about going to sleep to my videos, I forget to plug one of my other channels. I've got a new channel where I sort of paused for a couple of weeks, but don't worry, it's still very much up and running in my mind, called In Deep Sleep, where I've taken these live streams. And in fact, hi, if you're over there on In Deep Sleep, although I hope you are asleep at this moment. I've taken these live streams and I've just put them with a relaxing image and sound, so like a roaring log fire. And the idea is that this live stream plays, and then as the live stream ends, then the relaxing sound carries on and takes you through the night. So there's no adverts in the middle of it, so you can just relax, close your eyes, and hopefully drift off to sleep. So thank you for reminding me, reflective rambling. It's very kind. Just flick through the chat. Yeah, I think with that, Andrew K, though, saying let's hope the stage play sooner rather than later. Not much progression information in a while, unless I've missed it. No, so George R. Martin has been slow on the news front, I have to say. Recently, he's if you're an avid reader of his blog, you'll know that there have been a few times recently where there's been a month or so with no news. He's most excited about those direwolves. If you've not come across it yet, he's a big fan of direwolves, and I don't understand all the science behind it, but the headline is direwolves are back. We've managed to bring them back through some clever DNA thing. And he likes reporting on them and progress that's been made there. But no real updates on books or anything like that for a while, which I take as general positive things. He's going to be at 3 or 4 events actually in the second half of this year. You can overread into these things. I've decided not to read into it, but yeah, he always tries to go to Worldcon, which is in Seattle this year. There's a New York Comic Con, I think, in a couple of months after that, and another couple of events that he's going to be at. So I wouldn't read too much into that. He does always, every year, he tends to sort of go away and do stuff. So about this time last year, he was over in this part of the world. He was in England, a little bit of time in the Netherlands, up to Scotland. So he does try and sort of get around a little bit. Don't read too much into it, but hopefully he's managed to get a lot of writing done. Right, let's go to well, I think we're probably we should wind this one up now. We've been going for a little while. We will be back next week. I will do another one of these. I might do Varys. There's a lot of questions about what is Varys up to and what are all of his plans. So let's cover Varys off next week. Quick reminders: if you would like to see my videos on my main channel over on Spotify, watch them and listen to them. They are now available on Spotify. Just go over there and Google In Deep Geek. You will find it. New videos coming out as always, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and that's probably it in terms of reminders. Moderators, thank you so much. If you've been here in the chat, please do send them a little bit of love as we are on the way out. If you would like to watch more of these live streams, there is going to be a link appearing somewhere around here. If you would like to support this channel, then thank you so much. There's a link to my Patreon page appearing somewhere around here. And I will be back this time next week. Take care.